Hi, good afternoon. My name is Rodney Hinds, sports editor of the Voice newspaper. Going to be talking all things cricket today with two esteemed colleagues. First of all, Sam Morshead. I've got to introduce him, the digital editor for the Cricketer magazine. Now, if you don't know about the Cricketer magazine, you haven't lived, because quite simply, I read that as a child and it did influence a lot of my cricket thinking and thoughts. So welcome to you, Sam.
Thank you very much, Rodney.
And my other guest today, former cricketer, a man who has the moniker of the analyst, turned his hand very, very successfully to broadcasting and providing us with all the information that us lay people need from time to time. Simon Hughes, welcome. How are you, my friend?
Great. And I started reading the Cricketer probably at the same time as you, actually. I probably started reading it in about the 1970s, and it's still going strong.
Still going strong. And Sam, as I understand it, special edition of the Cricketer coming out soon?
Yeah. I think Simon and the print guys have been working overtime to get out a very special edition, relating in part to the Black Lives Matter movement, but more a celebration of black cricket history and those who have made a major contribution to the game. And of course, it's very relevant with Indies been over here for this summer, so that comes out in a couple of weeks in mid-July, and I'm sure you guys will be very interested.
And obviously, it'd be remiss of me not to mention the sad passing of West Indies legend Everton Weekes just lately. I mean, Simon, what tribute could you pay to Sir Everton?
Well, actually, I remember talking to Garfield Sobers about him once, and he said, very hugely influential character who whenever Sobers as a young man was in the dressing room with Everton, as an experienced test player, he just hung on every word. And one day Sobers said to Everton, and Leary Constantine was in the dressing room as well, and he said to the two of them, I want to know about batting. Tell me about batting. So Leary Constantine said, well, I just believe in going for it and smashing it and hitting it as far as possible, and people can't catch it if it goes in the stand. And then he said to Everton, what about you? And Everton said, well, I think it's very dangerous hitting the ball in the air because obviously you can be out. So I keep it on the ground. And I don't think he ever hit a six in his test career, but he just had this speed. I've watched a few old bits of footage, and he had this amazing dynamism at the crease. I suppose a bit like a right-handed Brian Lara, just very fast hands, very fast movements, and using his wrists to hit the ball powerfully. And his average speaks for itself, 58 in Test cricket, absolutely astonishing. Obviously one of the three Ws, three of the great West Indies characters of that era. And I think the other lovely thing about him, I just know that he's lived in Barbados all his life. And apparently he's never had a day's illness until, obviously recently when he was obviously not well and died, which is very sad. But to live till you're 95 and to go for a walk along the beach every day in beautiful Barbados sunshine and live till 95, that has a lot to answer for. That has a lot to recommend it.
Lot to do it. Sam, any thoughts, memories?
Memories is obviously hard. His career was well before I was born. But just looking at the stats for one, and also the stories about him from those who did see him play, it showed how much he was appreciated and how much he was loved as a figure, not just by West Indies cricket fans, but by fans of the game everywhere. There's a wonderful story about him potentially being born by the same midwife who also was in charge of the births of the other W's, Walcott and Worrell, which Jarek Himber did a piece for us online today relating to that. And I think that it just talks about community, doesn't it? The Barbados community, the cricket community of the West Indies, and he was such an integral part of it. And his stats are amazing and everything like that, but it also harks back to how important these players were for the general community in the West Indies in their time, and how important they were socially.
Yeah, absolutely right. So we've paid our due respects there to the legend that is Sir Everton Weekes, just recently passed. So we move on to the action of next week, July the 8th. England play the Windies. In the first test, it's going to be very, very strange. Guys, I attended my first behind closed doors football match on July the 1st. Arsenal versus Norwich. It was eerie. It was somber. Normally that stadium is full of 60,000 people, and there was no more than 300. That includes players, 25 journos, and relevant Arsenal staff. How do you think playing cricket behind closed doors will look and or affect the players, Sam?
Oh, it's interesting actually. There's some mention at the moment of the players from the practice match at the moment feeling a little bit confused. Might be the wrong word. It's very different to what they're used to. So maybe the ECB were looking at trying to put a little bit of noise into the venues for them, let alone the broadcasters putting noise into the venues for us, like we've seen with the football. I think it's going to take some getting used to for these guys, because one thing about English Test cricket is when the side's at home, they've always got a full house, pretty much full house for at least the first 3 days of a test. Might be different to playing in somewhere like Dubai, which is almost generally always empty. But playing in England, you have a crowd of 10, 15, 20,000 people. So getting used to having 300 people in there, just with support staff and media, will certainly take some getting used to. But as pros, I'm sure that they'll be able to figure it out pretty quickly. It's going to be interesting to see how the broadcasters do it, and how much they take their lead from football, and how much they manage to bring in that noise and atmosphere. I can imagine it can be quite tricky to do for cricket, whereas football, you can imagine in certain parts of the pitch, as things progress, you can get certain layers of it. But cricket seems to be a bit different. For instance, how would you do adjusted noise for a crowd for a drop catch, or for a run out that was a near miss, or for when something gets overturned by DRS? So there's so many different layers to it compared to potentially what football does. So really interested to see how Sky make it work. I think the players will find it a little bit odd to start with, but they'll get used to it.
Simon, you're obviously a man that's used to playing in front of large crowds. I
thought you were going to say in front of no one, because you have to be prepared for both as a county cricketer. You know, there are days when everybody's there, and obviously something like T20 or one-day cricket, you get full houses. I've done plenty of full houses at Lord's, but you know, you do have 20 people on a rainy afternoon at Leicester or Nottingham or wherever, or you know, in the south. If it's a dodgy day, you know, it can be no one at all. You suddenly start play at 5 o'clock after a rain interruption where everyone's gone home, and then suddenly the umpire say, "Come on, we're going to go and play." So actually, that is a good preparation, being able to switch on and switch off, irrespective of what's going on outside or what's going on in the crowd or no crowd. I think that players are so much better now at preparation. You know, all the kind of drills they do in the nets and mind games that they play with themselves to switch on and switch off between balls, so that you're really only focusing on the ball and the bowler. You're not really that conscious of anything outside. Obviously, as Sam says, it's going to take a bit of time to get used to the fact there's no one in the ground. But I think when you're facing up to a 90-mile-an-hour bowler, and one fractional mistake can cause you to, you know, get injured or hit or whatever, it does actually focus the mind really well, and you shut out all the stuff that's going on behind or around you, whether there's a crowd or not. So I think the competition between players and the team and the teams will suffice, and in the end, you probably won't notice the fact there's no crowd.
I mean, I referenced football earlier on, my visit to the Emirates as Arsenal played Norwich City. Football really came back first amongst the sports returning after the pandemic. The German Bundesliga was right up there. And even with the return of the Premier League, Sam, there has been a reference that the away sides seem to do better when there is no crowd in the stadium. Do you think we can link that to cricket? Because I think most fair-minded people would think and know that under normal circumstances, England would have gone into this series as red-hot favourites.
Yeah, I think they still go into it as favourites, albeit not quite as substantial as maybe they would have done previously. I don't know whether it would have. I think maybe Yoz would be in a better position to tell you whether no crowd would give an away cricket team an advantage. I don't know really. Yoz, what do you think?
Well, I think it levels it up. I think definitely home advantage is huge for two reasons, really, in cricket. One is the crowd, and the fact that you see familiar faces when you go into a ground, and there are familiar places, familiar dressing rooms, things like that. But also the pitches that you've played at many times, kind of roughly how they're going to play. So I think home advantage is huge, and you see generally that home advantage is a very sort of powerful influence in Test cricket. Very few away wins generally over the last few years, in terms of series anyway, not so much in terms of individual matches. I think that this, with no crowd, will level it up a bit. Everyone's a bit uncertain. It's an unreal sort of environment. So it is going to be a little bit more, balanced, if you like. But I think the West Indies batting will still be vulnerable on English pitches, even though it's a Southampton pitch and it's south of England, and we've had good dry weather for most of the last couple of months. So, it's not going to be a green seamer, but I still think playing against the Duke ball, even with no saliva on it, in English conditions where there's a bit of cloud cover and stuff, will challenge the West Indies batsmen now with no crowd, just the same as it would when there was a crowd.
Absolutely right. So we're talking about lots of intrigue until the first ball is bowled. We won't truly know what's going to go on, and I think that's what makes sport so fascinating at this time. Sam, in terms of players on both sides that you're looking forward to watching, in terms of England, who do you think we can put a little asterisk next to in terms of entertainer, match winner, etc.?
Yeah, sure. It's interesting. It's going to be interesting to see who they select in the first place, actually, particularly in the batting lineup. Given Joe Root's going to be missing for the first game, it means that there's a slot at number 4, which is open probably to one of Bairstow or Dan Lawrence or Zach Crawley. I think Johnny Bairstow, just before we spoke, got out quite cheaply in the warm-up game, which won't have done his cause any good. And on Saturday, the team will have been, or the squad will have been announced, and that's going to be about 22 players. I'd be quite interested to see Dan Lawrence in that England middle order. He's been threatening to break into this team for quite a long time, despite still being in his early 20s. He's been scoring runs for Essex quite happily for 4 or 5 years. He's a remarkably wristy player. Whether or not the pitches, which probably aren't going to be particularly quick, given they won't have had much tension as pitches otherwise would have done because of the situation, maybe wouldn't quite suit him, but he's a real talent. Equally, whether we get to see James Bracey at any point, he's just made 85 in the warm-up game, would be interesting too. Unlikely, I think, because of the nature of England's openers and Burns and Sibley kind of nailing that spot down. But the one batsman that everyone should be always looking forward to watching now for the next 15 years in the England shirt is Ollie Pope. He's an absolutely magnificent talent. He's got every shot in the book, and he's got the temperament. So whenever he struts out to bat, and hopefully he stays at number 6 for the considerable future as they allow him to bet into that side, and he should be one that people get turning on the TVs and making sure that they catch a glimpse.
Your face is positively illuminated when you talked about Ollie Pope. Yeah.
Any sorry batsman, Rodney, and I'm generally going to give them a glowing reference.
Okay, I understand. Just tell me some of the attributes that make him this potential star of the future for you.
He's averaging around 60 in first-class cricket over the course of 3 seasons, which is I'm going to get his age wrong. I think he's 22, but I might be wrong with that. But as a 22-ish-year-old, that's quite remarkable. And it's not just from a small sample size. The guy scores hundreds and he scores big hundreds. He looks a little bit like a young Ian Bell, and he's got some of the stroke play that Ian Bell had in his early career, plus some of the stroke play that Ian Bell added when he's got used to being a T20 player for the Birmingham Bears in recent years and playing in the PSL and things like that. So he's unafraid to play a reverse scoop early on in the Test match innings, as we've seen in New Zealand. He's unafraid to take on bowlers of incredible pace and incredible class and incredible experience. He's just got something about him. When you watch some batsmen and they're busy at the crease, but they still at the same time look in complete control. He doesn't look flustered very often, and the stats go to show that he's got everything going for him. So we don't want to build him up too much, despite having just every positive thing I possibly could. But he's wonderfully entertaining, but he's also got those mental attributes that you need to survive and thrive in 5-day cricket.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think the mental attributes are a good point because, you know, his talent is obvious and his range of strokes. But I think there's a couple of innings I've seen him play. One which not many people would have seen, which was for Surrey against Yorkshire. And Yorkshire had a very good bowling attack a couple of years ago, early season. And whereas Surrey were sort of 50 for 4 and early wickets, he stuck it out and really weathered the awkward period and played very sensibly, and then got through that and started to open his shoulders and play more shots. And that was an outstanding 100. And then the innings he played in South Africa as well for his maiden Test 100. I mean, the range of different shots he had in that, the tempo, the ability to, again, you know, sort of build the innings, play the regulation shots early on, you know, just to sort of construct a foundation, then be a bit more fluent, and then towards the end of the tail, totally take over and show us his whole repertoire. But everything was very well judged. You know, the pace of his innings and the shot selection, the timing of the way he increased the momentum were fantastic.
No pressure on Ollie Pope on this forum whatsoever. I can see that. Simon, is Shy Hope the West Indies Ollie Pope in terms of that batsman that has a range of shots and the mentality to deliver on the big stage?
I don't think he's quite the same. I wouldn't say he's as imaginative in a way. I think he's slightly more conventional player. I think he's a beautiful player. I mean, those 200s at Headingley, I was there, saw those 2 innings, and you know, it was a beautifully constructed performance. Just again, you know, up against a top class attack, able to resist it, still play fluent shots. I just love his touch. I mean, beautiful timing, lovely position, poise, you know, a really glorious player to watch. Very kind of fairly simple player, I'd say. You know, he doesn't sort of try and do anything too flamboyant. Just lovely on the eye. And I just worry slightly that his recent form hasn't been great. So, you know, there's always that confidence thing, but no doubt about the ability.
Mm. What about the bowlers, gents? Because as is the norm, the batsmen always get the love and the glory. What about the bowlers, Sam? Anyone that you're particularly looking forward to seeing on either side?
Yeah, both pace attacks. I mean, the 2 pace attacks are quite formidable, actually, when you come to think on either side. Whether you're looking at someone like an Alzari Joseph or Kemar Roach, or whoever you want to look at from the West Indies, this is genuine, exciting pace, the likes of which probably haven't been as deep since the Ambrose Morsheads. I would probably a fair assessment. And then on the flip side, you've got an England attack which has got the wily old guard, including, you know, Stuart Broad, Jimmy Anderson, but you've also got some ferocious pace there with Jofra Archer, Mark Wood. Ollie Stone is a guy who can tip 90 quite happily too. So, there's lots and lots of really exciting options that I can't wait to see get stuck into each other.
Simon, I think there's, not maybe with you two, but I think maybe the wider public, I think we take Jimmy Anderson for granted because this guy continues to deliver. Simon, what tribute could you pay to Jimmy Anderson? And clearly he's going to be pivotal again, isn't he, in this particular series?
Well, I think that the best tribute really was one actually that Nasser Hussain paid to him when he gave him his 150th cap. And he said, "You're a fast bowler and you played 150 tests. It's ridiculous." So I think his longevity is the most remarkable thing. And I don't just mean actually from a fitness point of view, physically, because, you know, I was a fast bowler or tried to be, and, you know, everything hurts every single day that you're a fast bowler. And he's endured that for nearly 20 years at Test level. But it's also the mental thing of still being prepared to focus and still having that desire to want to take more wickets. And it's not a simple matter, is it? He takes over after over to build up the pressure on the batsman and find little ways. It's not like he bounces them out or blasts them out. He sort of almost teases them out with subtle variations and, you know, little bits of swing either way. And, you know, it's so painstaking. It's like a sort of, it's like a tapestry, his career, you know, adding little tiny bits and gradually, you know, building up this fantastic picture. I just think his consistency, his skill and his longevity are remarkable.
Absolutely right. The great Clive Lloyd, arguably the West Indies' greatest captain, picked up some reports the other day that he suggested that this West Indies side could really make a fight of it in terms of this very unique and strange series which starts on July the 8th. Guys, is there a case for the West Indies winning a test, winning this series? And if there is, how do they go about it?
I think there's certainly a case for it, simply because of their bowling attack. Whether they've got enough depth in the batting is a different matter, particularly if the conditions suit England's pace bowlers, then it might be a bit tricky. They're going to have to get the runs on the board. But they've certainly got the arsenal to challenge England's top four, particularly in the first test, which means England's top four would be pretty inexperienced as test top fours go. And then Ollie Pope at 6, Joss Butler at 7. It's only Stokes who's probably the established test batsman out of the entire English top 7, all things considered. So, yeah, that West Indies pace attack, if they can make an impression, it'll be intriguing to see what the winning captain chooses to do after the toss on Wednesday, because it may well be that the conditions suggest that you should have a bat, but you know, you could blow yourself straight into the series with a devastating first session, and batsmen aren't going to go into it particularly well baked in terms of the amount of practice they've had, particularly pitch practice. So yeah, definitely got a chance, but I think they need to make the most of Joe Root not being there in the first test.
Yeah. Simon, is there a case for the West Indies at all, from your viewpoint?
No, I completely agree with Sam. I think it's quite, as I said, in a way, because of the lack of a crowd, it is slightly more balanced than it probably would be otherwise. I think the fact they're playing 2 matches at Old Trafford also slightly plays into the West Indies' hands, because if it's a traditional Old Trafford pitch, it will be hard and fast with a lot of bounce, and it will reverse swing, and which means, you know, the pace of the likes of Shannon Gabriel, if he plays, Kemar Roach, good exploiter of both the conventional swing and reverse swing, and others. I haven't seen Chima Holder, but I hear good things of him. Alzari Joseph swings the ball. So I can see actually a 4-pronged West Indies pace attack being really quite potent at Old Trafford particularly. So it's about the batsman. It's down to the batsman. If the West Indies batsman can mount a score somehow, cobble together enough runs, then they're in the game. If they don't, England are going to win fairly comfortably.
Simon, I'll stay with you because Sam mentioned, in terms of an established test player, Ben Stokes, who will obviously lead the side. Now, here's a guy where everything he seems to touch turns to gold. What sort of a captain do you expect him to be?
I think he'll be an excellent captain. I think it's the perfect scenario where he's not the captain for the whole series, but he has the chance to do it for one test, because, you know, he's so integral to the England team, batting and bowling and fielding, that there's a massive amount of strain on him physically and mentally. So to captain a team through a whole test series, especially one that's so condensed like this, would be demanding, given the all-round contribution he makes. But I think as a one-off, it's great because he really thinks about the game. He's a very sort of perceptive player. You can always see when England are playing, Stokes going to Root or Root going to Stokes to talk about scenarios and ideas, and so he's got a live wire mind, a very active mind for the game. I think, you know, brilliant motivator. Everybody loves him. You know, he's got huge respect. I just wouldn't like to see him captain for too long, because I think it would be draining, and you want him to be full ball energy wise for his batting and his bowling and his fielding. But as a one-off, I'm excited actually. I'm excited for him, and I'm sure he's excited as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Sam, I mean, last summer was super special, and I've underplayed it. But Ben Stokes provided the type of impetus and performance that means you can talk about him, in my opinion, in the same breath as Ian Botham. What do you say?
I think you certainly have to, just given the, you've got someone who's had such an impact on so many major moments in national sporting conversation, then you have to be able to compare them to the greatest in that sport. And therefore, even if he might not be quite of the caliber of as Botham as an all-rounder, he's still obviously got the impact potential, and that makes him able to be spoken about in those same terms. And sports people are great at forming conversation, and when you're great at forming conversation, you're a great sports person. So yeah, definitely. I don't think he's quite as good yet, but I think he certainly can be. He's probably up there in terms of his batting beyond Botham, but bowling wise, I'm not sure he will ever get to the same level as Botham did, and I'm not sure he will ever quite be able to achieve on both disciplines quite as high as Botham did. But he's not far away, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think actually he'll be a better batsman than Botham. He probably is just about there now, even though Beefy made 14 Test hundreds. Stokes is a more complete player who could pretty much bat anywhere. He could bat at number 3 or 4, whereas Botham tended to bat, 6, and that was right because he put so much energy and determination into his bowling that he needed the time off, and he couldn't really apply himself quite the same with the bat. I think Stokes has turned a corner. I mean, clearly in the last year, where he didn't necessarily win matches for England before, and he made contributions, and there's no doubting his effort and his ability, but he didn't necessarily have that ability to take England over the line. Clearly, last summer he did it twice, and now there's that conviction within him as well to add to the skills. So where his statistics may not in the end exceed Botham's, I think his impact on the English team may well exceed it in the end.
Listen, I've got a couple more questions for you both, but once again, it'd be remiss of me not to ask you this. We are coming up very, very soon to the anniversary of that World Cup win. Where were you, and how does it make you feel almost 12 months later? Sam?
We were both in the ground. I'm not sure. I think yours was as well. I was in the media centre. Yeah, I was in the media centre trying to figure out which of about 5 different match reports I was going to file at the end of the game. Yeah. So it all sort of passed by in a bit of a blur, and then sort of the 3 or 4 hours after that, just trying to get as much reaction and up on our website, and obviously coordinating with my team of guys who are in various places as well. So it is still a blur, and as you do when you're writing a piece like match report, you don't actually watch every single aspect of the game when it comes down to the wire. So I've seen the clips back. I've never watched the whole game in its entirety without the burden. It's the luxury really of being there for work. So I remember the general sort of tingling sensations, the feeling of it, and being walked around to the press conference around the boundary ropes when the crowd was still very much in there and the players were doing a lap of honour, and being that close to that was very special. It is a bit of a blur still, and I don't think it will ever really tune itself back in again. But yeah, it was quite incredible.
Yeah, Simon?
It was. Well, I was in the videotape truck in the car park at the nursery end, producing the analysis for Sky's coverage. And obviously we stopped doing any analysis for about the last hour because you didn't need any additional material. The game sold itself just on its own narrative. But when England won, everybody in the VT truck all just jumped up and cheered, and it was an amazing moment. I mean, I've followed England one-day cricket-wise and Test cricket-wise for 30 years or something, and it was just a huge climax of a tremendous 4-year campaign. So I felt very proud of the players for, really sticking with it. I felt particularly proud for Owen Morgan, who I first met when he was 16. in a little dressing room in sort of outside London in Chesham, playing in a benefit match. Didn't know who he was, sort of kind of chatted to him a bit, and he said to me then, quietly spoken, little Irish teenager, I want to play for England. You know, I really want to make it at cricket. And I thought, yeah, well, we'll see what you're made of. And in that particular game, he scratched around and made a few runs, and then suddenly it's a huge six from nowhere. And I thought then, okay, so you've got something here. And I've always followed his career since. I've talked to him whenever I could. I was so proud of the way he brought that diverse group together and got the most out of them. I watched at the end of the play, after all the celebrations, I was on the field just watching how each of them celebrated. You know, Bairstow went to his mum. Rashid had his parents, his father and his brother, I think, and maybe his wife, and they posed with the cup. Morgan had his family. He's got two sisters who also played for Ireland, and his dad, and proudly sort of parading the cup around. You know, I just love to see afterwards. Stokes didn't have his parents there, but you know, had lots of friends from Durham, and it was just a wonderful outpouring of emotion, having really dedicated themselves over that 4-year campaign, and obviously having lived through that extraordinary game.
Yeah, absolutely.
What about you, Rodney?
I was very fortunate. I was in Liverpool, I think, on the Saturday, and I got a call to say, do I want to attend the World Cup final? I didn't even answer. I just put the phone down, and I was on that train back. And of course, you know, I don't think sport gets any better than that. And I've got to say, I was in this box at Lord's, and in the box was the TV, obviously, showing the cricket, but also the Wimbledon final between Mr. Djokovic and Mr. Federer. And both were coming to a climax, the tennis and the cricket, at the same time. And incidentally, guys, there was actually a Formula One event taking place as well that day as well. Yeah. So sport came together, and I don't want to plug anybody else's show, but I think there's a documentary being shown that the weekend that we celebrate that anniversary. It was an interesting point you made there, Simon, just as we wrap up, about the diverse nature of the England team. Now, the West Indies team, and I think even the England team, I think it's just come through, will wear Black Lives Matter on their apparel next week. How significant do you think that is, Simon? How significant do you think that is?
Well, it's a culmination of the sort of campaign that's been going on now for, you know, well over a month, hasn't it? And I think it's important to recognize, it's in a way, it's a sort of recognition of the black players' contribution to not only English cricket, but all cricket. If we think back to the West Indies great side of the 70s and 80s, that changed the game completely, and I think made the game much more exciting, or much more difficult. I played against many of those West Indies players, and, you know, I've still got the bruises to show for it. But I think it added this sort of extra layer of extravagance and you know, sort of beauty to cricket, really, athletic beauty to cricket. And then obviously that induced a series of black players to come and play for England, who all had their important contributions. The latest of which, of course, is Jofra Archer. Archer, I think, was an extraordinary contribution to that final, and generally to the summer. And I just want to see more of that sort of player. I just think we have neglected the black community in the cricketing circles. We need to encourage them more. We need to find ways of showing what a fantastic sport cricket is, and what a great inclusive sport cricket is. I mean, I played in the Middlesex team in the 1980s, which had 5 black players in it, and we all got on brilliantly. And, you know, we learned about each other's cultures, and it was an incredibly bonding experience, which I'm sure is good for society. So, you know, if we can get, if the wearing the Black Lives Matters, the slogan on their shirts, can get more black players playing any sport, really, then, because I think sport brings people together.
Sam, it does send a strong message, doesn't it, to the wider community, what the cricketers will do next week, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's important at the time that sport recognises that there is a movement there, a social movement, which has got a good groundswell of support, but sport has a large part to play in the amplification of that voice. It doesn't have to necessarily back the political nature of some of the Black Lives Movement or those who have co-opted the Black Lives Movement. And those who are objecting to the use of it at the moment, I think, aren't recognising that all the England players are doing is saying that they stand by a point that is racial equality is necessary and has not quite been achieved, or in some areas has not been anywhere near achieved. And I think that it's very important for sports teams to show that they too have a voice when it comes to this sort of thing, and shouldn't be pressured by fear or by commercialization or whatever it is to be scared of using that voice. So yeah, I think it's important. It's strong-willed, and I think it should be respected across the board from those within the cricket community.
And you say exactly what you say, and you've backed everything you've said, because the Cricketer magazine, with all those years of history behind it, and the Voice newspaper are now in collaboration for this West Indies tour. Do you just want to share a little bit about your thoughts when you reached out to me as to how we could collaborate together?
Yeah, sure. So my perspective is that we as a society should obviously be supporting the Black Lives Matter movement and its moral standpoint, because to me it just makes sense as a 21st century society. But I don't think it's enough just to post a black square on social media or to write a few words in a column. I think it's much more important to do things that you can show you're trying to achieve some sort of change by. And this collaboration is designed to, well, help everyone, really. It's designed to help us because we can learn about your readership and what they might like that we do and what they might not like, and how we can better package ourselves to reach out to them. Hopefully it will help you guys because we'll get some additional content.
Certainly will.
Help promote the game. Exactly. Yep. And it just shows it's action beyond words. Words are great and they're important, but actions are more long lasting. And I think that this is what we're trying to do, is make a genuine point that we as a magazine, which has typically served a very white community, can and should serve every community. And should be the biggest proponent of cricket in the UK and abroad, but predominantly in the UK, that it can be. And teaming up with the leading black newspaper in the country, we all love cricket. We can share that love together. It makes perfect sense. We might not be typically natural bedfellows from a historic perspective, but when you break it down into the fact that we love cricket, we love sport, and we just want to share it with everyone, then I think we make perfect sense. I'm really looking forward to the next few weeks.
Same here, Sam. Many thanks for reaching out. Guys, it's been an absolute pleasure. Simon, continue to be the analyst. Always a pleasure listening to you. Sam, thank you for the opportunity. And we'll all catch up soon.